Hi everyone, and welcome back to Melody Crochena. My name is Beth, and today we are doing something a little bit different. So there we go. The last month I have been really busy with things, but one of those things was preparing for a women's conference at my church. So I was asked to pray about leading one of the breakout sessions and just kind of sharing my experience with something. And as I was thinking about it that evening and writing down some ideas, it became clear that I was meant to lead the loss or trusting God through grief and loss breakout session in the conference. So as I was preparing, I had put together a little thing of just the different losses that I have gone through in the past life. So really it started when I was 10, I think 11. I was 11 years old, and just my experience with grief and how I dealt with it, how I dealt with it led me to where I am today. And when we got to the group, that's not what the Lord had planned, and it was a beautiful thing what happened. Just we were there in the room, and people just started talking and sharing and comforting one another, and the Holy Spirit was just leading it, because it's nothing that I had planned, and I love that. I love to see that the Lord prepares our hearts and our minds, but He does a completely different work in the ladies that were in that group. And yeah, I mean, there's 100 things that go through my mind on why, but ultimately it's because that's what the Lord wanted to happen in that group. So I decided to kind of go outside that, or outside of my normal video here today, and kind of go over a little bit of what I had prepared for the session, because I know that what I prepared isn't wasted. I know that it was to grow me and strengthen me and help me to reflect on my past and just kind of figure out my own emotions on the subject because grief isn't easy. It's different for everybody. We all deal with it in different ways, different times, and it's not a one size fits all for everybody. So what I do share today, I hope and I pray that someone is encouraged by it, and if it's not your cup of tea, not everybody is in a place where they need to hear about grief and loss and encouragement through it. But if you are, then I would love it if you stuck around to just, I guess, hear what I went through. And what the Lord has shown me through the years. So I have my notes here. So I guess I'll just start. So today I'm just going to be sort of giving my testimony of the grief and loss that I've experienced and how I've dealt with it. And each of us grieves so differently and in different ways and for different things. Like, I have a lot of loss of deaths in the family and my friends passing away and miscarriages and loss of job, loss of friends because of moving and just that kind of thing. And it can hit us all so differently at so many different times and out of the blue. Like, you think you're fine, and then all of a sudden one day you're crocheting a beanie and it reminds you of your mom who died. And that's just well, that's one of my examples from just a couple of weeks ago. But so there are so many things that we can question in our lives, but the one thing that I can always turn to, even though I don't know, is that God does know. He's the author and finisher of our faith. He knows the beginning and the end of the story. And he holds all the answers. And we don't have to know the answers. We just have to believe in the one who knows the answers and know that he is working it out for our good. He uses these situations to grow us and shape us and to make us stronger in him. And he gives us these he gives us these testimonies in our life so that we can comfort others with the comfort that the Lord gives to us. And he is so faithful in that. And throughout these different scenarios that I have written down here, the one thing that I keep coming back to is God is a good God. He loves us and he cares for us and he knows beginning to end. He's all knowing. He's all loving. There's this one example of, we're crafters, right? So we know what a tapestry looks like. On the back side, it's a complete mess with the threads all woven, all knotted up, all crazy mingled. We don't know what the front looks like from just looking at the back, but the front of it, it's a beautiful tapestry, a beautiful scene. And that's like with our lives. We see the bottom looking up, but when God is looking down, he sees the beautiful masterpiece. Not saying that we're beautiful masterpieces, but he created us. But I'm just saying he sees the whole picture. He knows it. He's fastening. He's weaving it all together as we live our lives. And it's sort of like the golden thread. I've talked about it a few times here, but just seeing, there's been times in my life where looking back I can see like God's golden thread woven throughout all of these different circumstances leading me to where I am today. I think I've talked about that a couple of times, and just, it's lovely to be able to have that hindsight, just looking back and seeing and being able to acknowledge the Lord's hand, the Lord's work in our lives as we live our lives and we go through these problems and situations and all of that. Anyway, back to my notes. We are blessed in so many ways because we are not alone in our grief. Jesus has experienced all of it. There's one verse dedicated to it, and it's Jesus wept. This is when Lazarus had died, and he took the time to grieve him. He took the time to mourn, even though he knew he was going to go and raise him from the dead a few days later. But he knew, he felt that loss, he felt that grief, because he was really good friends with him and his sisters, Mary and Martha. And then when John the Baptist was murdered, he also took time to separate himself from the multitude. He went into the lake or the sea, and he sat in a boat and tried to get away for a little bit. We were not created to experience loss in the way that we do. So when God created humans, when he created Adam and Eve, death wasn't a part of the Garden of Eden. And so when we navigate that, we feel that separation deeply, because it wasn't meant to happen. We weren't meant to die. In the way, well, yeah, we weren't meant to die. So it takes a long time for us to get to the point, for me to get to the point where I can fully trust the Lord through all of it. I still fail at it daily, but it's a learning process, and my tendency is always to run away from my feelings. So I don't take the time to feel my feelings a lot of the times. It will hit me out of the blue and I'll feel it deeply then. But a lot of times I just want to run or hide and busy myself in projects like my crochet, or like video games, or books, or whatever it is that you run to. Maybe it's that, and it might not be any of it. When I was 11 years old, it was Christmas break, and I was staying at my grandpa's house. I would stay with him during the day while my parents worked, and we would hang out. I would kind of clean, like do some cleaning around the house and cooking and all that kind of stuff. And this one day, he wasn't feeling very well, so we ended up going to the doctor. He drove himself to the doctor, and he had like a heart test done at EKG or something. And I remember him telling me a story about when he was a kid. Him and his siblings were having a coal fight. Anyway, he had a piece of coal stuck in his forehead, and he showed me where it was, and that little tiny piece of coal was still there. I don't know, maybe 65 years later or so. I don't know how old he was when he got it in there, but yeah, anyway. The doctor cleared him. He went home. Later that evening, we ended up in the ER. My dad came and took him to the ER, took all of us to the ER, and he ended up passing away from a massive heart attack. And what I remember the most from that night is my dad praying and saying, "Lord, let your will be done." And while we were praying, it we heard Code Blue to ER, and that was my grandpa when he had died. And I just remember feeling angry. For the longest time, I was angry at God for taking him, for just, I don't know, for taking my grandpa. At that point, he was probably my closest friend. Just because I spent so much time with him and I pretty much told him everything. So he was one of my closest friends at that point. And I remember holding on to those thoughts and holding on to grudges, and I was just angry with the Lord for a very long time. I mean, okay, for 3 years. So I had gone to a winter camp one year. I believe I was in 9th grade at that point. And I just remember it was like a time of afterglow. So worship after the last session. We just stayed and did worship for a few hours. And I just remember being able to let go of all of that anger and bitterness that I was holding on to for so long because of my grandpa dying. And we were singing the song Take Me Into the Holy of Holies, and it was just going through all of the different steps that someone would go through to get to the Holy of Holies. And it's take me past the outer courts into the holy place, past the brazen altar, Lord, I want to see your face, pass me by the crowds of people and the priests who sing your praise. I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, but it's only found in one place. And I definitely remember realizing that my own selfishness, my anger was keeping me from going further into the courts and into the Holy of Holies, because I was angry, I was upset, and I wasn't trusting God to be doing his will for my life, or for the life of my family. You know, like, it's not all about me, but I was selfish and I was feeling that way. So that night I rededicated my life to the Lord, and during that time, Romans 8:28 was a huge verse in my life, and it's, for we know God, or we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. And God he allows these things to happen in our lives to mold us and shape us and grow us in him, so that we can produce fruit and grow and be an example and have a good testimony of what the Lord has done in our lives. And then a few years later, probably 6 years later, I was in my first semester of Bible college when me and my family heard of my mom's kidney failure for the first time. The doctors had given her about 3 years to live, and she, of course, surpassed those 3 years. She ended up living for 16 years after that diagnosis. But when we had first heard of that diagnosis, it was hard. Psalm 61 verse 2, it says, hear my cry, O Lord, or 61, 1 and 2. Hear my cry, O Lord, attend to my prayer. From the end of the earth I will cry to you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock which is higher than I. And I had one of my friends had given me or had led me to that verse and was just helping me to understand, or helping me to see and give me, like, I guess, a visualization of it, where the Lord is our rock in the middle of a raging sea. Like, though the world is crashing down on us, the Lord is still our rock. He is our stronghold, and we can trust in him. He's our firm foundation, and we will not be moved when we're on him. I still was ignoring the things that were going on. I never wanted to deal with them. Like, I wanted to know what was going on with my mom, but I wanted to, like, surface know what was going on, but not deeper. And then I would just busy myself with other things. It's hard to sit in your feelings. Okay. And then a few more years later, I was married, started having kids. I was pregnant with Ellie, my oldest, when I heard the news that one of my friends from Bible college had brain cancer. And that was hard. Just knowing he was young, and he had 2 sons and a wife, and just trying to process the loss of someone so young. And he did end up passing away a few days before my oldest was born. And then a year later, I had another friend who got in an accident during work. I think it was an accident, but he ended up having, like, heart issues with it and in a coma, and he had a young boy, and he ended up dying. And then, like, 2 days after that, I ended up having a miscarriage. And then 3 months after that, I had another miscarriage. And just, it was one thing after another. And that was a very dark time in my life. Like, I was just needing a change in my life. I didn't know what needed to change, but I needed something to change. I felt like a deep need for a big change. Like, we started looking at different churches, just something. I ended up dyeing my hair black and cutting it kind of shorter, just to get some sort of change and some way to process the grief of all of this. And during this time, my mom's health was still declining. She was still hanging on pretty strong, but I mean, 16 years with kidney failure, you're on a downward decline. But again, that verse of lead me to the rock that is higher than I. God is way up here. He's way up here. And I'm, like, just trying to keep afloat in the water. But he's right there. He is there to catch me and to hold me, to hold you, wherever you're at. Okay. A couple years later, I had one more friend from Bible college pass away from colon cancer, and she was so young. She was single and unmarried. She had so much joy for the Lord and so much joy for life, and the Lord saw fit to take her home. And just in all of these situations, we never necessarily will know the answer as to why, other than God using these situations in everybody's life who knew all of these people to mold them and shape them and grow them and make us who we are today. He has a plan, and he's always working his plan out in our lives, and the Lord sustains us. October of 2020. That's when my personal life was shaken. My mom had been in and out of the hospital for various reasons that whole year. A lot of infections, pancreatitis. She hurt her foot somehow. I can't remember why. But she was in and out of the hospital. There's an infection somewhere that they couldn't locate. And one morning, while she was in the hospital, I was talking to her, and she wasn't doing very well. She had stopped answering the phone because she was always really tired. And so one day, my dad called on three-way. He was at home, my mom was in the hospital, and I was here in Oregon, and they were in Southern California. So we were talking, and just in her voice, and if you've ever heard that slur of someone who is not going to make it very much longer, I heard it in her voice. So we got in the car. Like an hour later, we were all in the car, and we were driving down to Southern California. 15 hours later, we made it to the hospital. And they had already had to resuscitate her a time or two. I can't remember. But at 1 or 2 in the morning, we got to the hospital, and this is during COVID, like the height of COVID, October of 2020. But ICU let all of us in. My dad, my sister, and me. We got to go in, see her, and then the next day we got to go in as well. But we knew that we had to make a decision. She was on a ventilator, and things weren't looking good. So anyway, she ended up dying on October 25th. She was So she ended up passing away from sepsis. They couldn't find the infection where it was coming from, and she just couldn't hold on anymore. By the time we got back to the hospital in the morning, she was already brain dead. And anyway. This was the biggest loss that I have had, and it was really hard. It still is. and I know that the Lord is using it. Psalm 34:18, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart and saves such as have a contrite spirit. And that verse I clung to for so long after my mom had died, because there were a whole lot of things that we had to figure out. There's no way I could have done it without the Lord, because there's so many decisions that have to be made, and nobody's thinking in their right mind when they have a loss that big. So it was hard. It still is. My sister and I got much closer than we already were, which we were. We were already close. And we tried to help my dad as much as possible. He ended up remarrying 11 months later, and that was really, really difficult for my sister and I. But I will say that my stepmom is super. She's great. I do appreciate her so much for all that she does for my dad, and looking back, I can see the Lord working through that, even though that was a huge loss in itself. Just how it all went down. It was very hard, but looking back now, I can see the Lord's hand in it, how he just brought them together, and how she's been added to the family. Grief is not a one-time thing. It's not okay, we got through this, now we're done. No. It's ongoing. It hits you when you least expect it. I was crocheting a beanie with a skein of yarn that a friend of mine gave me, and as I was crocheting it, I could just smell my mom, and it took me about a week to get over that time where it hit. And that was just like a month ago, like it hits you out of the blue, and it's difficult. But Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. And we don't know. we don't have our own understanding, but we trust in God. He is the author and finisher of our faith. He is our creator. He holds us and the whole earth together. He knows every hair on our head. He knows every bird in the sky, and he knows when they fall to the ground and die. He cares so much. He knows all the names of the stars and the sands of the sea, and he's a big God, but he's an intimate God. So that is who he is. We have to remember who he is. Who is God? Who is the Lord? And who are we? Remember whose we are, rather. So we are his. We have been adopted as sons and daughters. Those who believe in him are his sons and daughters. And he cares for us. And he is not done with us. The Lord is faithful to complete a good work in us. Something else to remember is that God has been there too. Jesus wept over Lazarus. In Matthew 14, he took himself away to be by himself when he heard the news of John the Baptist. This is in Matthew 14. And this is when he also fed the 5,000. And God the Father gave up his Son to die for us, and he couldn't even look upon the cross that Christ was when he hung on the cross because he became sin for us. God the Father knows the grief of losing someone so special, and Jesus became what God abhorred. He became sin, and God the Father could not look upon his Son during that time. So just that deep separation and grief that he must have felt in that moment. We know that God has been through it all. He knows it all. He feels it all. And we can take comfort in that and ask the Lord for help through all of it. And when I think about all the losses and grief I've endured over the years, I look back and remember all that refining that the Lord has done in my life, all the molding and shaping he has done to make me who I am today. For we are born for such a time as this, and we go through things, through difficult things, so that we can comfort others with the comfort that the Lord has shown us. Through all of these different situations, I've had many conversations with the Lord, and he always comforts, he always helps, and he invites us in to taste and to see that he is good. He loves his children so much, and we need to walk by faith and not by sight. Through all of these situations, all these struggles, the main point I want to leave you with is that grief does look different to everyone. We each have our own stories, our own struggles, but the one thing we have in common is the Lord. We have been through loss and hurt and grief, and God is good. He is a good Father. And we can trust in him, and we can just take comfort in him. So I know this was a lot deeper than I have ever gone. And if you are still listening, thank you for staying around to listen. And I just want to encourage you in any way I can. If you need prayer for a situation, please reach out. I want to be here for you. I don't need to know anything. Just please pray. If you want to talk about it or something, we can schedule a time to do a Zoom call, or I don't know. Okay, so please feel free to reach out for any prayer or talking discussions. Again, I don't have all of the answers. I will never claim to, but I know the one who does. God is using our lives to mold us and shape us and grow us in him. And if you need encouragement or anything, please reach out. You're not alone. We're all struggling in some way or another, and if this even reaches one person who needs to hear it, then I'm grateful and blessed to be a part of that. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and again, thank you for joining me, and we will see you next time. All right, take care.